Hello. Okay, next we're going to move on to our set of notes. Make sure you have the right notes in front of you saying opposite values. Now, we talked about this when Miss Madera went over the examples, going up the mountain and down into the water, going up the football field and back down with a penalty, owing money and having money, those examples. So, we're going to jump right in and remind each other of what an opposite means. And opposites are numbers that are the same distance from 0 on a number line, but are in opposite directions. And in parentheses, I'm going to add, if they're in opposite directions, that means one of the numbers is positive, and then the other number has to be negative. In order for them to be accurate opposites, they need to be the same distance away from 0, and they are in opposite directions. One's positive, one's negative. Okay, so I'm going to scoot on down, and we're going to decide whether each pair of numbers are opposites using the number line. So I'm going to use different colors to represent these points on the number line. So let's look at the first one. 4 and 5. Here would be positive 4, and here would be negative 5. So thinking, they have to be the same distance from 0, and they have to be positive and negative. Well, that's positive, that's negative, but this is 4 spaces away, and this one is 5 spaces away. They're not the same number, so they are in fact not opposites. Circle this on your notes. All right, let's try another one. Negative 6 and positive 6. All right, one is positive, one is negative, and they are both 6 spaces away from 0. Those are true opposites. All right, let's try 7 and 7. Here we have 7, and then I'm going to put a box around this to represent the second point, 7. Well, yeah, both are 7 spaces away from 0, but they're both positive. That doesn't do any good. So those are definitely not opposites. And the last one, we have negative 8 and positive 8. I'm going to plot those on my number line. Now I'm going to take a look. Starting at 0, they are both 8 spaces away from 0. One is negative and one is positive. Great. Those are definitely true opposites. It's not enough that one is positive and negative. They have to be the same spaces or distance away from 0. That's the big kahuna. He's the guy in charge. Okay, I'm going to scoot this up, filling in our notes. There's one number that is its own opposite, and it's the one I just mentioned, 0. It's the big kahuna. 0 is the only number that is its own opposite. Can you guys put like a star around this? I think one block actually, guessed this correctly when I was playing the rapid fire. Up, what's the opposite of up? Down, what's the opposite of left? Right? And I said, what's the opposite of 0? And they said 0. They were correct. 0 is the only number that is its own opposite. The only one. It's a rule breaker. Number 4. What is the opposite of positive 10? That's negative 10. What's the opposite of negative 200? Well, that would be positive 200. Can you also write next to this just 200? For positive numbers, you can either put the symbol or just the plain number by itself, because most numbers are assumed to be positive unless there's a negative sign. Most times out of 10, people just assume, oh, you say 200, you mean positive 200. Number 6, a negative sign can be used to show the opposite of a number. So while we've been using it as this is negative 8, that's where it belongs on a number line. Negative 6, negative 5, that's where they belong on a number line. When you actually see the sign like this, it could just mean put an arrow here the opposite of. Think about it. If I change this sign to these words and read them like this, I'm going to go back up here. Well, I'll do it on a Post-it. That'd be less confusing. So if I put 10, and then I put this sign in front of it, now it's negative 10, but if I read it, it would be the opposite of 10. Well, what is the opposite of 10? I'm going to go back to my number line. The opposite of positive 10 is negative 10. So really, I want you to get in your heads and make sure this is on your notes. I'm going to circle it. This dash, this negative sign, in words means the opposite of. So let's continue on with our notes. Number 7, if you see a number like this, and I'm going to rewrite it again because I kind of wrote over it on my notes. Right here it says negative and then parentheses negative 9. Uh-oh. So an extra negative number, like, whoa, I failed that test twice? No. That's not what it means. This means the opposite of negative 9. The opposite of negative 9. So I'm going to go back up here. It's saying I want the opposite of negative 9. I'm going to go to negative 9. The opposite of negative 9 is positive 9. Actually, oh, doy, I didn't see that down here. So the opposite of negative 9. I'm going to go to negative 9. I want the opposite of that. It would be positive 9. So we're going to use the number line. The opposite, because that's what that dash means right here. The opposite of negative 9 is positive 9. Uh-oh. Now they're trying to confuse us. Do you see this? I got 2, 3 lines. I can count. 1, 2, 3. Yes. So now, on a separate Post-it, I'm going to write, I'm going to zoom out, negative, negative, negative 9. I'm going to make sure that this matches. It does. I'm going to zoom in and show you. The opposite of the opposite of negative 9. They are literally going like this, guys, on the number line. Kind of like the opposite of the opposite of the opposite of the opposite. Every time they say the opposite, you're going to bounce to the opposite side of the number line. So first you need to know where you start. Negative 9. So I'm going to start at negative 9 and work my way out. The opposite of negative 9 and then the opposite of that. It's kind of like Simon Says, where it's like, touch your toes, touch your hands, touch your toes. They're trying to trick you, kind of. So I'm going to start again slowly. You start here. Negative 9. I'm going to start there. Then they want to know what's the opposite of negative 9. That's easy. That's positive 9. Now I'm on to the third one. What's the opposite of that? And then I go back. So this is negative 9. There's an easier way. And Miss Madera will show you her trick with her hands. Kind of like a reflection bouncing off of a mirror. Kind of like when you shine a flashlight and it bounces around the room. The opposite of the opposite of the opposite. If a number has an even number of negative signs, it's going to be a positive number. So for example, I'm going to use a different color. The opposite of negative 9, that was positive 9. See how there's 1, 2 of the negative signs? That's an even number. If the number has an odd number of negative signs, then it's going to be a negative number. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. There we go. So if I had, like the one we just did, the opposite of negative 9. I have, see these lines? 1, 2, 3. That's an odd number. That would equal negative 9. Another word for finding the opposite of an integer is called negating. an integer. Kind of sounds a little similar to negative. If you're finding the opposite, you're negating an integer. But 9 times out of 10, you will not see this as often as if somebody asked for the opposite of the opposite of the opposite. You're going to see this writing more than someone saying, please negate an integer. That's not likely going to happen, but it could. All right. Make sure you have all of this on your notes. I can tell you with confidence that these opposite of the opposite or the opposite of the opposite of the opposite, it sounds like garbledy-gook. But if you are feeling confident as you can understand what an opposite is on the number line and use your resources to find it, you'll be in good shape. Now, normally I just have you start